Hi. Am I audible, visible?
You're audible, you're visible, you can share your slides.
Sure. I actually would prefer if you could share my slides, but if that's a hassle, I'm happy to go ahead without the slides as well.
Yeah, give us a minute.
Sure.
Yeah, we're sharing your slides, Simran. I'll be forwarding it whenever you tell me to.
Perfect. Thank you, Anmol. Um, Hi, my name is Simran. I'm a PhD student planning to graduate by fall this year. In my 10 minutes with you, I want to quickly introduce you to my doctoral work. Use a personal problem, to discuss the platform literature, and of course, talk about the findings that led me to say that food delivery platforms are content creators on social media. On the next slide, you see that this position paper is part of my doctoral project titled Aggregating and Toggling: How People Use Platforms to Do Care, Consumption, and Convenience. Through my thesis, I offer a view into how food delivery platforms Swiggy and Zomato aggregate users onto their interfaces by using push notifications and social media. Um, I studied this through a combination of digital ethnographic methods. And then I studied people's experiences of being aggregated on platforms as consumers and food and hospitality businesses by doing ethnographic fieldwork in Mumbai in people's homes. And then I followed them into a co-working space. And I also spent time with the food and hospitality businesses in the city. So I study food delivery, and you might wonder what I'm doing in a conference on social media in a panel on creator identities. I have to say it's great because each time I've presented this work, I get slotted in the gig work from the global south kind of panel. Obviously, it is correct, but my classification alongside colleagues who are writing about working conditions on platforms for gig workers makes it an odd switch for the audience. Anyway, this is me flagging the personal problem I was telling you about. I'll come back to what seems like it's personal to open up a conversation about the silos in literatures on platforms, where we have social media platform literature on one side, and then quite separately from it, the literature on logistics and on-demand platforms. We're familiar with how different platforms have shirked responsibility by talking neutrally. They say we're simply aggregators, we only offer technology, we're not employers. On the next slide, I tell you that in my position paper, I show how on social media, these otherwise neutral sounding platforms talk casually and sweetly like content creators. For instance, Zomato's Instagram bio was meme page, occasionally posting brand posts due to business team pressure, whereas competitor Swiggy would crowdsource their bio through recommendations. In 2020, on-demand platforms across the world worked with Instagram to create a button that would lead users from various businesses' Instagram pages to their uh, listings on on-demand platforms. On the next slide, there is a video, and I wonder if we can play it. So this is comedian Govind Menon, who's joking about Zomato's push notifications.
Simran, give us a second, please.
Sure.
Yeah, we are playing the
Cake, yummy, trummy cake, Monday. What? Govind Hangi Wangi? Order some food. What the fuck is this push notification? Order some food, Babu. You must be hungry. You guys are getting very weird with your push notifications. Think.
Yeah, the video
Right.
has
So
played.
perfect. Thank you. So this is just to show that even though push notifications come from the app, they often reach social media in a variety of ways. It could be screenshots of consumers who are amused by the push notification. It could be comedians joking about it. So you could join Govind Menon in asking who is getting convinced by these, but I asked a slightly different question, which is what is going on with brands talking like people, like our friends, who is making this content? And by asking that question, um, uh, I'm not denying that platforms are selling or seeking to sell. But on the next slide, we see that studying the contents of this sweet talk and how it's made through in-house creatives, as well as outsourcing some of this branding work to creative agencies, can also show us limits to talking in this fashion on social media. By placing Swiggy and Zomato in that media scape, I found how social media enable people to participate in branding, and in those ways also threaten platforms' control over their reputation. And there were three ways that I found limits to branding on social media. One was that managerial workers built links with the media entertainment industries. They also built personal brands, which translated to income streams through moonlighting or having side gigs other than working for the platform. Some popular examples that might ring a bell are marketeers Akshar Pathak, Saiba Bali. The second limitation was logistics workers' YouTube blogs. They created an unofficial promotional culture which brought attention to how to join platforms. Is there a demand to do delivery work in a small town in UP, for instance? But they also inadvertently expose loopholes in platforms' everyday on ground operations. The third limit I found was that platform users, ranging from restaurants, delivery workers, and consumers, would take to Twitter or X uh, and go outside of the private in chat complain mechanism and use Twitter to or X to complain about services. So these complaints could range from there is no chutney with my samosa to why are the working conditions of delivery workers so bad. So consumers sometimes would also complain on behalf of workers. And often CEOs of both companies would be tagged, the Food Standards Safety Authority of India would be tagged. All of this barrage of complaints led to Swiggy and Zomato creating separate dedicated complaint handles. From those handles, they dropped the creator like sweet talk and spoke neutrally, often inviting aggrieved consumers to direct messages. Swiggy and Zomato also made the interface of their apps more fun, a bit like social media itself, be it by sending push notifications that pushed information and pulled users back to the app, or by having this new section called Vibe Check on Zomato, which was a bit like an Instagram story. So they were pushing restaurants to create content, ephemeral content. And yesterday I found out by talking to Gunjan that they also commissioned mini web series to make sure that uh, users were entertained on the app. On the next slide, I'll spend some time now to go back to what I promised was not a personal problem. Social media and on-demand platforms have been studied a bit separately. So when I tell people I study platforms and food, they either assume my project's about recipes, blogs, the stuff that's been studied as digital food culture, largely outside of India, or they assume that it's about the poor conditions, working conditions of logistics workers. How could it be both? Do I not have a focus? But my review of the literature gave me a clue about why we might have trouble holding work and culture together. I found how social media has been studied as a site of culture, leisure, increasingly work because of creators, but quite differently from that, on demand platforms, Swiggy and Zomato, have been studied as sites of precarious work. More recently, compelled by creator culture, we see the citations in the center, the coinage of terms that use labor or work as a suffix, visibility labor, aspirational labor, so on and so forth. This literature draws on an older heritage of media scholarship from the 2000s on prosumption, user labor, and creates a bridge between these silos. So I imagine my work and this thinking of platforms as content creators to contribute to this bridge building between these silos. And I see how platforms compete, but they also work together as a platform ecosystem to do branding, whether it's on demand, working with social media, working with streaming, and they all work together to make interfaces sites of buying, selling, working, and having fun. So, along with production and consumption, I add reproduction to the mix. This means that consuming involves work, but reproduction brings our attention to the fact that there is also care, and care includes domestic chores like cooking, sure, but it also includes entertainment, fun, and leisure. Um, and So, led by the final slide, let me stop here to hear from you and think if you think this might be useful in making cross platform studies a research agenda. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Simran. We'll have a Q&A session after we are done with all the student presentations.